Hello, hello, and thank you for being here once again in this channel. Thank you for stopping by. I'm so grateful for you showing up, following what I bring forth as transmission. And today I'm especially excited to be playing in the field with an amazing sister, colleague, woman, medicine woman, and so many more things. Her name is Lauren Dickinson. She is a visionary, and in her creative amazingness, she's also the founder and CEO of Orion Retreats, specializing in conscious travel and transformational retreat experiences. Within over 20 years in the healing arts, Lauren combines her roles as a consciousness thought leader, coach, artist, and retreat facilitator to create transformative programs that empower guests and clients across the globe to awaken to their divinity. This is such a powerful life and soul purpose, path, and goal. Thank you, Lauren, for being here, for saying yes to being here today with me.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice to see you and share this space with you. Thank you. I'm honored.
Yeah, this is amazing. Lauren is currently in Mount Shasta, which is one of my most beloved sacred spaces and places on earth. So that frequency is here in the field as she and I were tuning into this space. Just before I hit the record, we could feel the beloved presence of this teacher, this mountain, Mount Shasta. So, Lauren, I love your story. One of the reasons I invited you to be a part of this YouTube channel, this podcast, is because I was amazed at your versatility, at the breadth and broadness of your scope and your creative vision, and at the same time, your groundedness and ability to be actually on the ground doing things and affecting life. And I know that you had a very unique beginning, and I was mind blown when you shared that you actually had an exposure to Sufi mysticism very early on in your life. And I'd love for you to share with us how this path opened up for you. Please bring it on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Gosh, it's been a crazy ride for sure. Um, I I've my experience and my thoughts about my childhood now is obviously completely different from how I experienced it growing up. My father was an initiate of Radha science. It is a faction, kind of like a derivation from the Sufi mysticism. So I grew up with a very otherworldly experience in a way of like my dad meditated every day. We were raised vegetarian. My parents didn't drink. They raised us to be good moral people. So I couldn't really like in my teenage years rebel too much, all that kind of stuff. But really, what it did for me was to expose me to, like this secular world is not our true home. And so to grow up in that and knowing that our true home is, going back to creation and to source, it gave me such a perspective of not having like a really big attachment to the material world, but then also just attachment to the creation itself.
How
Honestly,
old were you as a child, or how young were you when this started in your consciousness, when you have a conscious memory that this started?
gosh, that's a really good question. I don't ever remember it not being there.
Oh,
And I remember like as you start growing up, like you start to ask questions of like God, the universe, source, like where we all come from. And my dad was like our go-to person to like ask these like
what?
questions. And I think, I mean, that's such an interesting question. I think I really became aware of, well, for one, how different it was. Definitely like in like preteen, but like around 7 or 8, I was really starting to ask my dad some important questions. And, I have a really beautiful story about how it connects to Orion and why I named my company Orion Retreats, because I was asking questions about our origins and the source of where we come from and all this stuff. And we had a very beautiful conversation around that. But I really think that I grew up almost with a sense of detachment, for better, for worse. And honestly was a challenge for me growing up, and coming into my young adulthood to be more part of the world and put myself out there. And it's been part of my own healing journey to like feel comfortable being seen for who I am, what I think, what I what I do, not just, how we exist in the 3D world. So that was both challenging, and as I see it now, it's one of my greatest gifts too.
Well, I can't imagine as a young little girl thrown into the school system to be authentic with these topics and these questions that are way beyond the natural age of 7, 8, 10, 12, whatever, what that must have been for you at school. Can you share something about that?
Yeah, I distinctly remember, I think that there's a borderline, a little bit of like not autism, but just like so, I was definitely just very different. I thought differently, very
Retreat,
conceptually.
retreating, a retreat.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and being very quiet. I was very much of a mute when I was a kid, and I remember, um,
Sorry, that makes me laugh.
I talk so much now. I'm just kidding. I'm such like, yeah, I've learned to be so expressive, and the art has helped me to do that. I remember a few of my teachers picked up on like, no, she's not quiet because she's like not intelligent or there's not a lot going on upstairs. Like, there's a lot going on in there. And so my third grade teacher actually, I share this only every once in a while. So like you're maybe like the third or fourth person I've ever told this to, but um, I my third grade teacher wanted to put me into the gifted class in school, and it also had to one of the classes that had the more like physically handicapped, mentally handicapped kids. And so when they tested me to be in that program, I don't recall most of this. My mom tells me this, but I not only flunked the test, I flunked it with flying colors. Like I got like a 20 or 30%. And my mom thought it was because, well, I don't know if she directly thought this, but like it was one of those things like, well, why did she not want to be in that class? Did she not want to be amongst, other handicapped people? And I do remember thinking, I don't remember flunking the test, but I do remember thinking that I didn't want to be treated any differently just because someone thought that I was smarter than somebody else.
It's
And
almost like
so
you did that on purpose.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what my mom said. And she said, why didn't you? And I think that was part of the conversation. Well, why did you flunk it? She said, and I had told her I didn't want to be treated any differently,
Yeah.
and I think that that's like at such a young, I don't know how old you are in the third grade. Was that 8 or 9 or something like
No,
that?
it's 8.
8. Yeah. To know that and think that and to have like a sense of, I don't know, like humility to think like, oh, I don't want to be treated as better or
That's
worse or everyone's the
amazing
same.
awareness. Amazing
Yeah.
awareness for an 8-year-old.
Yeah. That we're all the same and that it doesn't matter, So that kind of guided me throughout most of my childhood of just like, you know, being in the world, but not of the world. And we're all like, I had such like a
Yes.
service heart, even young, and we're all here for each other. But it did have its challenges when teenagers can be really mean. I wasn't really well understood. I even had this thought this morning, which is really interesting that we're even talking about this. Like I got called a poser because I thought that, people thought that I thought that I was cool or something like that. I was just quiet and I was just really like a little bit of a loner, but I had friends. But I just kept to myself. And I think that as I've grown into, my maturity and adulthood, like I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of what I've done. But back then I felt probably a little bit lost at times,
You know what I'm
besides my own.
perceiving as you're telling me this story, and I'm connecting with that young Lauren and that teenage Lauren, that this quietness was also probably uh, a state of being because you had so much awareness of so many things that you were kind of observing the world around you. It's almost like you were like, where do I fit in here? And you were okay just observing and matching it with all the things that were already aware that were already going on for you that you were aware of.
Yeah.
That like makes so much sense for me that you would be quiet and not out there saying, no, 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 it's this, that. It's like, what is going on right now in the world? This is like not my
Yeah.
reality.
Absolutely. And I remember thinking like of like watching the world to teach me how to be in the world. I had no idea. I was
Yeah.
such like a imaginative head in the clouds kind of kid. Like early on, I played outside by myself all the time. Even though being in a big family, and 6 brothers and sisters, I was alone a lot, just out of my own, like going out and exploring and doing stuff. And I remember thinking like the world is teaching me how to be and observing other people. And when I came to realize that not everyone sees the world the same way as I do, or they don't feel as connected to creation or spirit, spirit world at least, that's when I really, really started to kind of even go further inward because I was trying to figure out, well, what's my place in that? And that's why I say the part about autism, because like I know I'm not autistic, but I know that there's a connection between like gluten and autism. And so I only in my 20s I realized I was gluten intolerant. But the part about the individuation and like most, I just watched this thing this morning, like most kids individuate and really discover their identity as a teenager. I still like I didn't do that until like my 30s, really, to really like settle into who I am and not just like product of my family and my, religious
I
spiritual upbringing.
think I'd like to restate that phrase. Kids begin to try to discover their individuation in teenagers, but they don't do it until a lot later.
So that's normal. Okay, that's good to hear.
Um, as you're sharing your story, I realize that we have a lot of things in common, a lot more than I knew from the conversations we had had prior to today. When I was a little girl, I was raised instead in a typical Roman Catholic tradition in Argentina. So very much the influence of Spain, of Italy in that country, and very much the church being a thing that the whole family would go on Sunday and all of that. And I was on Sundays, I would go to learn catechism and also some day of the week or whatever. And my mom shared with me, but I have a memory of this when she shared it with me, that when I was probably around 7, the teacher was teaching us all the names that the Old Testament and the New Testament call Jesus and God. That was the lesson, right? And so she's like, because the Jews would call Jesus, well, the God, Yahweh, and all the names. And I remember raising my hand. My mom told me that the teacher called the home, okay, with a problem and saying, well, but in the end, there's not a Jewish God and a Catholic God or a Muslim God. God is God, the creator for everybody. And the teacher went like, no, God is the Catholic God and da 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 da. And it was like, that doesn't make any sense, And then they called home and they said what ideas they were instilling in my mind because I was
Wow.
6. But I just knew, as I know now at 60, a lot of decades later, that it's just creator is one energy and whatever you call it, and whoever is the religious dogma that is incorporating the wisdom of that being that is omniscient and omnipresent, it doesn't matter the name you give it, right? But I already knew that when I was 6. And I
Mhm.
too, instead of like you being silent, I was just my mask was to be outgoing, and I was bullied a lot and I suffered a lot and I was alone a lot on my own because I too have had a very inner creative world. And I
Mhm.
also played alone, one of 4 siblings, and I played alone all the time in my room, outside in the garden. And I had this big, big inner world. And then teenage years were so difficult for me. And then, I came out into adulthood. And so you were telling your story, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how many parallels, like with very different foundations. So it's fascinating.
Yeah.
So I trust that what we're sharing and your story will touch and resonate with so many, regardless of our own original story, because
Yeah.
it's just part of how we are exposed to life and how we make sense of it all, you know?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, why don't you tell us ha when do you have an awareness that you were actually stepping into an awakening path? Like, how do you go from what you shared to really being the aware woman growing into your own spiritual path and soul purpose?
Gosh, that's a wonderful question.
Yeah,
I
just
do,
a simple question.
yeah, light stuff. Yeah. I do want to add though too, like when you say the parallels of our lives too, and we show up wearing the same color. I mean, this is
Yeah.
all like meant to be like sister, sister, right?
And this wasn't plan you all. Like, this is
Yeah,
just like, oh my gosh, we're dressed in the same color.
love it. Um, I think that I was kind of like when I went to art school at 18 and 19, and then 20, I was kind of like getting used to like, okay, being in the world. Okay, I found my art. That's what I can do in the world. And I feel like when I was yeah, all the way up until like 21 when I left, school and kind of had to like let that dream go a little bit for a number of other different reasons. I had a few really key experiences that really like planted me even deeper onto the spiritual path. Like I said, like it was part of my upbringing, so I'd never felt off any spiritual path, but like that anchor point that I really got into deep with it was the year when I was 22, my father passed away. And it was my first, a number of different things were going on at the time, which is stuff for another story. But and I can say this because I'm, as I said before the call, like I'm really getting, trying to be better about speaking my truth and what my experiences have been, and being more comfortable with it too. But I had my first experiences as a seer and having visions when I was 22, and it was all, at first I thought it was just the trauma of what happened with my dad that I was like, partially like, spinning
Lauren,
off, or like
I
trauma.
lost my dad at 22 as well.
What?
Just keep going.
I didn't know that. Okay. So I'm okay. I'm sure this is a lot to uncover here. This is cool.
Yes.
Um, yeah, I had my first experiences of seeing things and then things that would come true later. And then actually in it, that was the culminate having those experiences was the culmination of something else that happened that before my dad died. It was almost like a precursor. I went to this it was a Christian church, and I don't it was in Bellingham. I don't even remember the name of it, but the most important part of it is like the pastor, the woman pastor, pulled out three different people from the audience to speak like this word of God to, and I was the third one, and she like downloaded this like oracle of like all this stuff that I was just sitting there like
Wow.
blown away of the things she was saying, and nobody would have known what she was saying was true except for me because they were my experiences, and basically like oh, in a lot of strange ways, almost like gave me a blueprint for then these visions that I started to have when my dad died. Again, thinking it was trauma or something. My brain was just like I was anxious or something like that because I was there the night my dad died. So I was, as I was processing all of that, I thought it was me going crazy or something like that. Like trauma can do so many different things to us. But when I started seeing those visions, and then those things started coming true, and in the prophecy that this woman gave me that day in church, like it all started to kind of like unfold in front of me. Now, some of it's happened, some of it's not. Like I believe in string theory, so there's multiple potentialities at all given times, right? But that was the really like learning how to pay attention to the universe while you think certain things are going to happen. I think in mediumship and psychicness, I don't think it's always responsible to either tell other people this is the one potential for the future and that's it. And so when you go through that experience yourself, like I had to continuously like walk the path as I was like, okay, this is not finite. This is not necessarily like what's absolutely going to happen. So I've walked that path for a while, and that's when I went down to Oregon to be with my family after my dad passed. And I was there a little bit beforehand too. But then like over the course, I eventually about a year after that, being with my mom and my family there, kind of all this healing and hunkering down. I went back to Bellingham, and that's when I got onto the healer's path. And it's interesting how that started too, because I felt like it was divinely orchestrated because it wasn't a choice that I had made. When I was younger, I knew I wanted to be in the healing arts. I was kind of like, oh, I want to heal with my hands, not knowing what that really was. I was working for a chiropractor at the time, and that's how I'd gotten into wellness in general. But then one of our patients, clients came in, and he was a shamanic psychotherapist. And he wanted to hire me for some extra part-time work, which I was totally in for, doing some insurance billing. So when I had first started with him, he gifted me my first Reiki attunement, level one. And he's like, I don't know, I feel like you're going to be really good at this. And so he gifted that to me, and that was like the divine, universe saying like this is the path.
This
And
is the
so
path.
like I jumped in. Last 20 years, I've learned almost every modality that ever sparked my interest. And but that was that beginning point that the universe plucked me and said, nope, here's
Yes.
your path. And I dove in deep. Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that. Of what you shared, there's so much to unpack. And I want to go back to this church where you went to, which clearly was divinely guided because you weren't in the Sufi church, or it was like a completely different spot. And clearly, this pastor woman was channeling for sure. And potentially she was given the instruction to pull you, like you needed this. This was absolutely, uh, telecommand, from above, right? Divinely guided from above. And you said something that is so key and that I want to underline for the listeners of this conversation. And it's something that I preface every single multidimensional reading I do with. And a multidimensional reading is when I not only access the Akashic record of a person, but also connect with the person's guides and read, quote unquote, potential future, right? And the one thing I always say is, nothing that I'm saying here today is a decree. Nothing is a forgiven thing. It's yes, this is going to happen because, first of all, I don't have the ability. I would be God if I would decree with such certainty. All I can tell you is this outcome could be beneficial for you. This outcome is a potential outcome. This outcome, which is potential, is less beneficial, but I'm never going to give a certainty of, oh, this is what's going to happen, because it would be completely irresponsible and not true. Because the minute the person ends the session and makes a different choice, the paths based on the choice point have changed already. So
Yeah.
we cannot decree or determine. So I love what you're saying. Yes, I too am aware of string theory and how that works. So I love that. And the fact that so young, you were able to already observe yourself in not falling for the illusion that the path or that a certain action meant that then this other thing was going to happen. That
Mhm.
is very wise and awake already to do that. But I really was guided to bold and underline what we're saying for everybody, because if you are in front of anyone who's telling you, oh, this is the future for you, run away fast, because you're not
Absolutely.
in front of somebody with integrity and truth. They're somehow they're in an illusionary world, and no, so use your discernment there.
It's so important that you bring that up too, because like in the spiritual world, there is a can be a lack of integrity or lack of altruistic like divination, like not I truly don't believe that anyone has any like ulterior motives. But I do think that when people get into like spiritual narcissism or the ego of, oh, I know, and so therefore I'm going to tell you. And honestly, um like my mom had an astrologer once that we had in Sedona when we lived there, and he like flat out told her her second husband was going to die. Well, guess what my mom did? She started kind of like being in fear and worrying all the time that he was going to pass away. He did, but it was like, I don't know, like 10 years later, all this kind of stuff, everyone's going
Imagine.
to pass away. But she lived then in such a state of worry and fear that like how is your quality of life if you think one certain thing? And he like was the type that kept like kind of like pounding it in, is like, keep watch out for this cup. It's going to be the
Oh,
next two
that is
years. And it's like
horrible. Yeah.
so horrible. And I think it speaks to again that egoism, that if you're going to walk this path of a sacred healer, divination tool, mouth of the divine, like you have to be so responsible and make sure that you're not limiting anything by speaking this, but you're almost limiting them, because if they get attached to that, then they can't always see like, oh, this is just
Another
one
path.
person's
Right.
possibility.
Right.
Yeah.
I was just dealing with this in a very gruesome way with a client of mine 2 days ago in a session where several years ago an astrologer had told her something about an illness. And it was such a powerful prophecy that she, several years later, was still struggling to remove that decree, and she
Mhm.
had fear about it. And
Mhm.
it blew my mind because it spoke to me about a lack of responsibility. Like you say, you cannot tell somebody, oh, you will be sick in 4 years with this and that. That's insane. And
Yeah.
you don't really know if that's true, because in those 4 years the person can take so many different paths and choose so many new timelines that the outcome, it's not certain. So it's really wild how the egoic power of a divination person can really mislead. And sometimes even with unbeknownst to the actual person doing the divination. They may be in the ego, not have solved, not have evolved fully. And because of this, I always say to everybody is like, always listen to your gut, listen
Mhm.
to your discrimination tool.
Yes,
If
that's
something inside of you says, just don't go there. It's wiser than anything you can think of with the mind. Trust that gut feel, trust that innate intuitive response, right? Even with regards to who's in front of you and when you're listening to what we're saying, does this resonate as truth? If it resonates as truth, which I'm hope it does because we're doing it with pure integrity, but if it does, keep listening. And if it doesn't, fine, just go somewhere else because there's something off for you with whoever you're listening to, that something inside of you says no. And this is something that we forget. We have the ability and the power to discriminate what information we put inside our minds, inside our souls, inside our bodies, and to hold that power, not give it away. So
absolutely.
important.
Yeah, we have a duty to ourselves and to not be full sponges to on positive or negative, whether you're into the new age stuff and all the spiritual stuff or getting sucked into the matrix. Like you have to like stay strong and just like, yeah, follow your own. I mean, the whole path of being on a healing path in general is like trusting yourself. Don't give your power away even over to another healer,
Yeah,
another like spiritual
absolutely.
person.
That's
Nothing.
giving your
There's,
power away. Yeah.
you know, and the, really like standing true to your inner guru and your inner like I grew up in a philosophy that has an external guru, more of like a master because he's mastered. Um, that could be a whole nother conversation.
Yeah.
But really, like he also teaches like it's not about me. It's not about fixating on me and me telling you how to live life. It's about trusting you and you being your inner guru. And I love that. I love
Yeah,
that.
because we are our inner guru. I love that direction. So I have a pending thing of all the things you said, and it's something I wanted to talk about in any case, which is Orion. My whole life, I felt a connection with the Orion constellation and Orion's belt, and it's the one constellation that you can see in southern hemisphere and northern hemisphere. So, I grew up with that constellation in South America, and I'm seeing it now that I live in North America or in Europe. So it's really powerful. My beautiful husky dog that had one blue eye and one brown eye was named Orion. And I'd love to hear from you about that thing your dad said and what that meant.
Yeah, that's a really great question. I love sharing this part. I was a big dad's girl, and dad was like my hero, and always went to him for all my questions. Um, and I don't know again how old I was, but I think I was around that 8 or 9. I think maybe as old as 10 or 11. I really don't, I can't quite remember. But I remember sitting down, and I was like, random, completely random. Like, Dad, if I could go to any star in the galaxy, I would go to the middle star of Orion's belt. I had no idea where this came from. I'd always look up, and I would look up at the middle star. And my dad was into all kinds of metaphysics, you know. I mean, you should see his library. Like, so I grew up around this. So like it, but what he said, it kind of blew my mind. He was like, "Well, you know that that's a Stargate, don't you?" And I'm like what? And so that kind of got me down the rabbit hole path of, okay, well, what's a Stargate and the wormholes to other galaxies? And of course, my Scorpio rising brain just like absorbed all of that and really got into that. And that was, again, it spoke to my connection to the constellation. But then when I did go down to be with my family for a little bit right before my dad passed away, he was in the process of building some different philanthropic projects, which involved calling. We were building like a free hospital, and a number of different initiatives, and he called it the wellness. Excuse me, he called it the Orion Center, and found out later, after his passing, I have a bunch of his business stuff that the structure for his business was, the Orion structure and Orion Holdings and all this Orion stuff. And I just always wondered, like, I wonder if that was because of that conversation that we had when I was such a young
Wow.
kid about Orion. Like, I didn't know if he had a personal connection to that. And I only learned that since then. So it really, like, when I built Orion retreats, I called my healing, Orion wellness, all that kind of stuff. So I've had that for a while. But when I did Orion retreats, it was just like a natural, like, oh, of course, because, you know, traveling around the world and doing transformational work and metaphysical retreats and all that, it was just natural that it would be Orion as well.
So this brings me to the last question I have for you, which is, can you tell us a little bit of what led you to create Orion Retreats and the scope of what you're doing? I'd love to
Yeah,
hear about that.
thank you. I'm so passionate about it. Really, the concept and ideas of retreats were little bit new. I knew that like in 2015 when I was in Dallas, learning a new modality, I knew that I wanted to take people around and give them healing experiences around the world. I didn't really know much about their, I don't even know if I'd heard their term retreat before, but I didn't really know much about it. But I had that seed idea. And then we were at a retreat center for a little while. And marketing and the admin stuff. I was like, oh, this is a thing. This is really cool. It's like, I can be good at this. I have managed chiropractic offices, wellness centers. Like, this is like my whole admin background in wellness, besides, training modalities that I learned for healing work. And so when I got into that, I was like, that's really interesting. The relationship kind of fell apart. Things have moved on. But I remember being like, well, I have all these healing modalities. I know so many colleagues and friends and coaches, and I've been through coaching programs. So I knew a bunch of coaches. Like, I would love to do retreats. I would love to bring in my people to help do retreats. So it started out as like this idea for a collective of people who wanted to have impact and make, not just anyone, but the people who really wanted to like help people and change the world. And so it started out with just a few people that I plugged into this. And then as I kind of, I'm a generator. So sometimes I just have to generate a human design for people listening. Sometimes you have to like, the creation process is just going through it, and then things come and you evolve and you respond. So as I started this out, I started getting more and more ideas, and then it expanded into somebody asked me, while I was doing my own retreat planning, I found some educational courses and invested in myself, my knowledge, and how to run my own retreats and market them and all that. And then other people started approaching me to do retreat planning for their retreats. And so it turned into that. And then it turned into like, okay, I still want to have like these high level, like facilitator retreats. And so it's turned into like mastermind retreats, and it's turned into like retreatpreneurs. And then now I've evolved on the business side into doing more like white glove, like high level, retreat planning, but then also retreat marketing. And now we have new products for that. And now I'm getting into corporate retreats with our, go-to retreats. So it's really kind of like evolved in such a beautiful way. And the retreats themselves are such like a beautiful container for healing. I've had a private practice in the past, and I think the biggest calling that I had to retreats is like, you can take 5-10 minutes out of your day, go to your chiropractor, go to your alphabetist, go to your Reiki person, get some healing, and then come back. And unless you are like really, really committed, like it can act sometimes as a band-aid, you know, and and you're still giving away your power to somebody else, to a healer, to whoever it is that you're going to. I mean, unless you're super aware of it, which a lot of people are. And I'm not knocking practitioners by any means. I've
No,
been a
no, I
practitioner.
understand what you're saying because,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So having the experience of like, okay, how do you put people in the same environment where they are receiving something from someone else? Because if they were able to do it themselves, they would have. So sometimes we do need help. But where is the sense of like self-responsibility and ownership? Where like, I need to handle this, this, and this so that I can improve my health, improve my energy, improve my relationships, have a better spiritual life and experience, have more intentional living. Like, how do you really help people do that unless they're in some kind of long coaching program? What if you took like the coaching experience and encapsulated it into a more in-depth healing experience where they go deep within and really have a chance to look at things. They're away from their distractions, they're away from their regular life, do the work that they need to do that they've been avoiding, usually, like we all do, and then go back into life and have integration and really like kind of make that starting point of a new way of being. So that part really attracted me to really like give people those kinds of experiences that they may not be getting elsewhere so that we can all heal. And as we heal the world around us.
There's something to be said to also the level of intensity that a healing or the conveying of a technique or whatever the retreat is about when you have a group of people gathered, which already multiplies the energy in an exponential way, not in a sum of all the parts. One plus one is not two, but a bigger, much bigger number. And that energy that is much higher in this container, and then you have the intensity of having it all packed in a short period of time that makes the experience very deep and intense. And for the way in which, as humans, we are wired, it just reaches very deep within us. And you said something very important 2 seconds ago, which was, and then integrate that when you go into your life, because then it's like you have this massive activation during a retreat. And then when you go home, if you just say, oh, I learned it all at the retreat, nothing will happen. Like you really need to continue that integration. But that gift of this intense power that happens in a retreat has the ability to propel us, to make us do a leap into a new state of being, a true
Absolutely.
transmutation. It's almost alchemical, something that otherwise you go one step, one step, one step. And if you do that same program in 9 months, it's not the same thing that if you did it in like a 5-day retreat.
Yeah,
The same amount of conveyed information, but the transformation resulting is different in because of the
absolutely.
intensity of it.
These they serve as pattern interrupts. We will continue doing the same thing until we have new neural pathways. And
Yes.
sometimes you need that either that intensity or that breakthrough experience that you can only have when you're totally immersed in a retreat away from your normal life to break a pattern. And it can reset you, and you still will be a slightly high, I feel like not elevated because it's not better or worse or higher or lower, but an elevated state once you leave, but you're not going to be able to sustain it. You'll kind of drop back down to old patterns because that's the way the brain works
Yeah.
too. So it's very like neuroscience based too, is that retreats can be like a pattern interrupt, start your new life
Absolutely.
and give yourself the support so that you can maintain that.
Yeah. Yeah. And also give yourself the gift of a vacation in a retreat, like also just like, yeah.
Somebody else handle the travel
Yeah.
details.
Yeah.
They plan your itinerary and all your food for you.
Yes.
Just go
And
have
you can
fun.
enjoy. And I have one more question. I said it was the last one. I have one more, but I know you
We
are
could talk
an
for hours.
amazing artist, and the painting you have behind you, which matches our colors, happens to be one of your paintings. And can you, I know you started art, you mentioned that, and I know that you did that as a younger lady, but how do you incorporate that in your daily life, and how do you manage to do so many things? This is a thing as a generator that you're definitely ahead of the curve for me as a projector because you have so much energy. But can you tell us a bit about what does creating art do for you at this moment of your life?
Thank you. This moment. Okay, that's ooh. I sometimes blame it on either ADHD or just like having too many interests for being all over the place. But and energy is kind of like one of those like I do have a lot of energy, but like I also have to like if I overdo it as a generator, if I overdo all these things or spread myself too thin, then I crash for a few days and just need to go inward. And art is the one thing that serves me on both sides of that. When I'm feeling good, when I'm feeling energetic, art can be it helps me to stop my brain long enough to like put some color out there and it becomes like a filter for my emotions. But then also when I'm not feeling good, then like, oh, when was the last time that I painted? When was the last time that I was creative? So it also gets me out of any like energy slumps.
Yeah.
How it serves me right now, like I used to be a lot more prolific. Like when I was in Dallas, when ironic, I talk about this a lot in some of my publications, but like after my dad passed away, I lost my creativity. And it
Mm.
wasn't until I was in Dallas and
The
about
grief.
yeah, absolutely. And the trauma. In 2015, 16-ish, more 16 is when I started randomly, longer story on the other side, but got my creativity back and started doing abstract art, which I'd never done before. And I just, in Dallas, I was like, I would get up in the morning, I'd paint, I just, wow, a bunch of color, go to work, come home and do it all over again, stay up till
I
midnight.
love
Had
that.
this thing. And so it got me back into it. And I really think it was part of like a really key part of my healing experience, but then also like how to like kind of break out of my, trauma or break out of my, suffering in a lot of ways. And so that's much different than how it looks for me now. Right now, I've been focusing on commissions. I had a commission that took me a good, like, solid, I think, 7 months to do. I had these two big pieces that overtook my entire living room. I finally shipped them out a few months ago, and now I have another one. And again, that's overtaking my living room. But it's because I have my studio and my office trying to do the same thing. But I don't paint every day anymore. I wish that I did. Like I'm trying to get myself a schedule. It's like, okay, I wake up and the first thing I do is I get creative because it's so nice. But again, creativity is one of those things is like everyone has it. You always have it, and it's a matter of where it comes out to. So
Yes.
right now, a lot of my creativity is going into my business and my company and
Yes.
my creations and projects. And so like art itself has been a little bit of a byproduct, more like sidelined. However, like in the last, month or two that I've been working on this commission, like that's like goes back to like my time. That's for me. Like I can do all these other things for other people, for
Yes.
products, for
Yes.
customers and clients, but my God, my art is for me. And I love
A
that. So
meditative thing,
I
when
nourish
you're creating,
myself with
you're
it.
channeling directly from the divine and putting it on
Yeah.
your, canvas. So, yeah,
Yeah. I have to like carve out time for it
yeah, yeah.
versus like it was such more and more part of my daily life. But I
I
love
can
it because it's my
see
time to nourish
how
myself.
it was more cathartic in 2016, etc. It seems like the catharsis of painting and creating helped you heal a little bit of the grief or move beyond the grief. And now it's more of a, this is my time of joy and creation and yumminess, and I'm, doing that. And on top of everything, you are creating something for somebody else that's going to pay you, which is amazing. But you said another thing that I want to get on. It's funny because I keep saying we need to finish and I keep bringing conversation, but it's so fascinating. But is this thing about you're creating a lot in your business because I shared this with you already. My whole life, I thought I wasn't creative. I have the ability of having a very well balanced right and left side. I'm really good at the activities that are writing an artist. I studied to become an artist, and I
Mm.
ended up not following through, but I did that for many years. And in music and singing and painting and all of that. And at the same time, I'm really good in mathematics and logics. My undergraduate was in information systems. And so, for
Wow.
some reason, for a big majority of my life, probably until my late 30s, I thought of me as this logical corporate manager because I was a general manager, director of many divisions internationally in corporation and all of that. And I gave myself I thought I was this very masculine oriented, logical, path, which is an irony because those who know me say that I'm so emotional and so colorful and so not that. And, now that I know my human design and that I read human designs, I look at my human design and I'm like, oh my God, like I'm like a creative everywhere you look in my chart. But I discovered my own creativity creating the first website for this business 10 years ago and creating and in the kitchen. I'm amazing in the kitchen. I just know what to blend with what, and the most delicious food comes out. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I'm like, oh, this is my way of being creative. I don't need a canvas. For me, creative meant a canvas or ceramic. Like I had to have like that kind of traditional artist result, or otherwise you're not an artist or a creative. And then I discovered that no, that creativity is everywhere, and
Yes.
that really we can be super creative without necessarily ever painting a canvas. And I
Yeah.
love that. And like you, I too put it in my business. My business is so creative, such an amazing space for creation. And I love it. I love discovering that because it's such a playfulness, right? There's a playfulness about creativity and art.
Mm-hmm.
So really to narrow it down, I know that in line with the space to be playful and in line with the power of retreats, you've just created a very unique program and gift. And can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yes, I'm super excited about this. Thank you for bringing it in. I again, just through the passion of like wanting to create these experiences for people, um, at any point that they're at. Like I think there's something to be said about people who are seasoned in retreats and they know what they're looking for and all this kind of stuff. But what about the people who don't? What if like they're a little bit more shy or just don't know about this whole retreat thing or don't want to like am I going to go to like Bali and cry in front of 20 people? Like that could be like such like an out of like their comfort zone thing. So like I came up with a plan and a program that allows people to have a retreat experience for themselves, with themselves, and by themselves. Because the whole point of a retreat is to get in touch. So what can we do both before, as the retreat, or even after retreat, keep that integration of being in touch with ourselves? So it's what I call, I love that, it's called Elevate the Sacred Year. And it's an at-home personal retreat membership where we have beautifully crafted and themed retreats sent to you each month, where we have suggested itineraries. This is what you can do. These are the different things based on, we're going to have adventure, we're going to have self-care. Right now we have kind of like our signature program, but you get that, sent to you every single month, and you create it yourself. You don't have to do it in front of other people, but you have one day a month where you do more than that, but really just like where you can create a day for yourself to nourish yourself, do
Love
what you want to do, get in touch, journal. Like we're going to be incorporating human design, what that looks like for each type. And then in addition to that, I've curated these beautiful subscription retreat boxes that are chock full of all these goodies, like depending on the theme for the month. Like we just sent out our January boxes, and they have, well, I don't want to spoil the surprise for anyone listening, but they have tools and things that people can really use to like have on that day of retreat for themselves. And again, you can do it more often than one, but at least if you give yourself one day a month, you can check in. How's Lauren doing? How's Shakti doing? How are we really doing? We're so busy being out there and doing and going.
honestly
How do
blocking
we?
a full day for you.
Yes, exactly. How can we be in that space?
And that is, I love the idea. And we're going to put the link in the description to this video if you want to check it out. Also, because it's so ridiculously affordable. I don't want to give numbers in the video, but so easy. It's like, like so you want to check it out. And also, you have a gift, right? That you can give us an ebook.
I do.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. So we put together an ebook called "How to Craft Your Own Retreat," so that if you want to just dabble, see, get it kind of a taster of what this looks like for yourself. I've just outlined guidelines for you to create a day or a 2-day itinerary for yourself to do the things based on whatever it is that you want to do, and then gives you kind of a taster of what a full day of a themed retreat would be. To go a little bit deeper if you want to. But the free one, just try it out, see if it's right for you, and just give yourself the gift of yourself. Come home to your own heart. And I just think that this is such a beautiful way to gift that to people, is to give them something, a free guide to do that.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yeah, we'll put the link. It's a free guide, you all. And this thing of coming home. This is really what everything I do is about. It's about the homecoming of you coming home to you
Mm.
and discovering more of you and uncovering more of you, letting go of layers of conditioning and really I see them like rugs placed on top of our heads, and so we remove these rugs, these layers, and this is what this is all about. So I love that concept. Thank you, Lauren, for all the juicy uh, share you've done with us today, for sharing your own journey, and for bringing your light and your joy and your super high energy. You even talk fast like I do.
I even feel like I'm talking slower than normal, so that's really funny.
Imagine that. So thank you for being here. This was fantastic. It's fantastic to have you here today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and just sharing this space. I just feel it's such a soul sister connection with you. I love every minute of it. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you all for being here, for listening, for keep coming back, for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to this channel for more, and I'll see you soon. Thank you.